Good morning from sunny Spain. I'm in Spain right now, but I'm about to cross over into Britain. You can see a Spanish and a British flag up there, so I presume that is the border. We're spending the day exploring what Gibraltar is, why it's British, what it means for Spain and for the United Kingdom, and what it's like to visit Gibraltar today. I've actually never visited Gibraltar before, but I'm joined by Rich, who is also making a video. I'll put all of his information in the description, and he has been to Gibraltar many times and he's going to show me around. This is the Rock of Gibraltar up here. So Gibraltar is essentially just like a giant rock, and then there is a settlement at the bottom. We'll be going up to the top of the rock, even though it has got very expensive recently, and we will be exploring some of the historical sites and the little city at the bottom. We're in La Linea at the moment, and this is where the border is. It's just like a little border town. What we've got here, a los trabajadores españoles en Gibraltar, to the Spanish workers in Gibraltar. I was just reading the population of Gibraltar is about 38,000. When they need more people to come over and do all sorts of work, construction, working in cafes, restaurants, etc., I'm guessing that they come from Algeciras and La Linea and the surrounding area, which does obviously add a complexity to it not being in Spain. Right, so let's cross this border. Now, obviously the UK and Spain generally get on all right, but I think if you could pinpoint one source of contention, it would be this. So everyone was just being way through, and I was like, oh, that's fine, no problem. So I just held off our passport page. I didn't realise everyone being way through was either Spanish or had an EU passport, and then they saw us, they were like, no. So our British passports had to be stamped. We're in the kind of the no man's land between Spain and Gibraltar now, and we have a Union flag up there, along with the Gibraltar flag, and what's the other one?
I'm not sure.
Is that the UN flag?
I'm not here, actually.
Huh. Drop me a comment if you know what flag that is. So bad news, the main thing to do in Gibraltar, the cable car, is closed. There's still loads to do, but the cable car is apparently the only transport that can take you to the highest point, and as soon as you get here there's a telephone box. Wonder if it still works. We don't use these really in the UK anymore, and I mean you're not going to use them in Gibraltar either really. This public pay telephone accepts GB Telecom phone cards and coins in the following denominations. There you go, you need your GBP. So we've got Gibraltar, Royal Gibraltar Police here, which same sort of branding as the police in the UK. We've had Winston Churchill Avenue, and we've had a red phone box so far. A lot of what I've heard about Gibraltar is that it is more British than mainland UK in many ways, like stereotypes. We'll have a look and see how many of them we can find. Here we are, map of Gibraltar here. So we're sort of up here where the runway is, and the rock is over there. But let's have a think about whether we're going to make it up there. You can hike to the top. It takes a couple of hours. But look at that. That is one steep rock. Oh, I think I just missed that. EasyJet plane just took off. So when you arrive in Gibraltar, if you want to walk to the city, you have to cross the airport runway. So this is what everyone's waiting for here. And everyone's going now. But sometimes if a plane is coming, obviously you have to wait for a bit. We've got Waitrose and Partners, Britain's quality grocer, and we've got Eroski as well, which is a Spanish, well, I don't know if it's a Spanish brand, but we've seen them in Spain, haven't we? Here we go then. This is the airport runway. I'm actually not sure if I've stood on an airport runway before, you know. Oh, it is. It's windy. My hat might blow off. Here's the terminal there. There's British Airways flight. Right, we've made it across the runway. I didn't lose my hat. So, this is really strange because obviously scenery-wise, climate-wise, it feels like we're still in Spain. But then you've got another telephone box there. You've got all the British road signs. Everything is just in English. Really, you could be in any city in the UK here. Like, the buildings look very British. The streets look British, everything's in English. It's just a bit disorientating. I was just looking at my phone at something and then I looked up and we've got Wagamamas here, got Las Iguanas here. I'm at Bristol Harbourside right now. Now, it is my first time in Gibraltar, but it is not Richard's first time in Gibraltar. How many times have you been to Gibraltar, Rich?
Oh, I don't know, 10.
Really?
Yeah, maybe more.
Yeah?
We always used to come here when we were kids.
And why have you been here so often?
Because my grandma has a flat in Marbella, and it's not far, is it?
No.
So it was always a bit of a novelty day trip.
Yeah.
A little bit of the UK and Spain.
Yeah, definitely. And you went to a family wedding here, didn't you?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So Rich already knows quite a lot about Gibraltar. I've been doing a little bit of research. We're just searching for a coffee shop and I will share some of that with you in a moment. Oh, and they celebrate British Mother's Day. Nowhere else, as far as I'm aware, celebrates Mother's Day on the same day as we do. So I know in Spain it's a completely different day. It's another little reminder of where we are. So we're going to go a lot more into Gibraltar history throughout the day, but a very brief timeline is that the Moors came here in the 8th century. They were here until the 14th century when the Reconquistadors, the Christians, took back over. But in the 18th century, the British and Dutch took control of Gibraltar from the Spanish. In 1713, a treaty was signed that granted Gibraltar to the United Kingdom in perpetuity. And because of this in perpetuity agreement, it has been British ever since. There has been referendums. Gibraltar people have been asked if they want to stay as part of the United Kingdom or if they want to be part of Spain, but overwhelmingly they have always voted to stay as a British overseas territory. However, I don't believe there's been a referendum since Brexit, and I don't know if that would change things. So you do pay in GBP in Gibraltar as you are in a British overseas territory. I've seen an exchange office here. There is an ATM. I've got no idea how much that would charge if you don't have a British bank card, or even if you do have a British bank card, to be honest. I think it is highly likely that everywhere will accept card. So I don't think you have to worry too much about having sterling cash on you, but here is an exchange bureau if you need it, but it is shut today. So the settlement of Gibraltar was first established in 1160, and this is when it was first decided to build a city at the foot of the rock. A water gate like this has been in place since then. So we'll just walk through now and this should take us to the city centre. Ah, lovely. And then we come out to the old square here. So it was Moorish for about 600 years, Castilian/Spanish for about 400 years, and it's been British for around 300 years now. So it's been British for nearly as long as it was Spanish, arguably even longer if you don't count the kind of initial part when it was Castilian before Spain was really a country. It is nearly lunchtime. Rich seems to be making a beeline for Taco Bell. You want to go Taco Bell?
I suppose it'd be cheap.
Yeah, true. I don't know if I fancy too much grease though.
Yeah, we can have a look around.
Yeah.
The main street.
I'd be quite happy to just grab a sandwich. This is really strange. You've got all of these British, well, Taco Bell's not British, but you've got all of these like chain stores. Like you've got Costa Coffee there, you've got Burger King along there. But they're all in this like kind of fancy uniform lettering. So you've got Taco Bell, Crown Pharmacy, Costa Coffee. So you don't really see any of the branding until you go inside, but then let me zoom you in. That is very much Costa Coffee branding. Fish and chips there. We did actually have fish and chips when we were in Fuengirola the other day. So I made a video the other day, if you've not seen it, about a lot of the Spanish towns on the Costa del Sol that have had a lot of British specifically influence from a lot of people who've migrated over there. But obviously, this is a whole different ballgame. This is British. It's not just a British influenced place. Oh, and look what we've got here. Can't be proper Cornish pasties. Well, I guess...
The same brand you get, I think.
Yeah. But if they're made here, they're either not fresh or they're not Cornish. If they're made here, they're not Cornish pasties.
True.
The law's on my side, babe. That was very random. We were just filming outside here and a policeman walked up to us and he was like, oh, hi guys, how are you doing? And we were like, oh, are we getting in trouble for filming or something? Anyway, really nice guy. He was like, oh, are you tourists? We were like, yeah, just visiting for the day. He was advising us on what to do. And then we were like, oh, we thought you were going to tell us off for something. And he was like, no, you've not done anything wrong, have you? Anyway, he was saying he's from London, but they decided to move here just largely for the sun, and he now is a policeman here. You didn't ask him if he fancied talking on camera, but he said he wasn't really allowed to. And he was saying, interestingly, I thought that Gibraltar was still part of Schengen, but apparently with Brexit it is changing and they might not be anymore, which is causing some issues around the border. So Rich is getting excited about the spirits prices. I must say I would be buying the Whitney Nil handcrafted gin, which is €17, still cheaper than you'd get it in the UK. Actually, no, it's quite a lot cheaper, isn't it? Yeah, it's like 40 quid in the UK, isn't it? For like a bottle of that kind of gin. Yeah, all right, I take it back, that is cheaper. These are all Rock of Gibraltar replicas, and again, they're all looking very British, like stay with Mr. King. What is interesting as well is the buildings, they don't look British, they look Spanish, but I guess it's buildings kind of adapt with the climate, don't they? So the buildings that were made here were made for warmer, sunnier weather to let the heat out rather than keep the heat in, as our buildings are in Britain. Another bureau de change there, but just don't rely on changing euros if you're visiting on a Sunday, because everything is Serrano, closed. M&S here, and I was hoping to be able to get a M&S salad or a sandwich or something, but it looks closed as well. Gibraltar seems to have adopted Spanish opening hours, i.e. everything is closed on Sundays. Todo está cerrado. I like how there's the British food is written only in English and the Spanish food is written only in Spanish. So Gibraltar is very famous for its fish and chips. And this made me laugh. So we've got British food here, written just in English. Spanish food here, written just in Spanish, apart from cheesy nachos, which apparently are universal. Ooh, and got another post box here, and this is a VR post box. So this was built during the reign of Queen Victoria. More Cornish pasties, / not Cornish pasties. £10.50 for a Cornish pasty, which seemed very expensive, but then actually the rest of the menu looks all right. And we've just looked here, and they do jacket potatoes for £7.95, which is more than Wetherspoons, but it's not too bad. So I think we're going to just grab a jacket potato here for lunch. Jacket potato, beans and cheese. You can't get much more British than that. Lunch is finished, and I'm just going to take a little look inside the pub here, because it looks very, very British. You got things like this, and then you go through. All this like memorabilia and artifacts and stuff, and all these pictures. Gibraltar focused, and then this looks like your standard British public house. Now we need to try and find out a bit more about what the general sentiment is at the moment, but just noticed in this souvenir shop you've got all of these stickers, magnets I think they are, saying keep Gibraltar British, GBZ, Great British Zone. You have also got here an EU sticker, and you've got here a Union flag, a Gibraltar kind of flag on a shield, and an EU flag. Are the aspirations to remain a British overseas territory but also rejoin the EU maybe? I was just doing some research when we were sitting down about the Schengen thing. Obviously the UK left the EU when we left the EU. And there was, well, at the time of it leaving, there was a proposal that Gibraltar would be part of Schengen. And there's been a lot of talks about it, but since 2023, the talks have kind of been at a stalemate. So that is why there is much more of a hard border, and that's why we had to show all our documentation as we went through the border and make sense as to what the policeman was saying. Yeah. Rich just mentioned that during the Brexit vote, Gibraltarians would have voted as well.
They overwhelmingly voted to stay in the European Union.
Yeah.
I think I want to say 100%. That might not be correct. But definitely very high 90s.
Yeah. Because obviously it makes their life so much easier being in the EU. But alas, 'twas not enough. You can see here how much of a sort of foreboding peninsula it is, and how I guess, given that the mainland is, well, not the mainland, but given that the rest of Spain is sort of here, how this was very easy to capture, because it is kind of isolated, kind of out there on its own. And we've been exploring this bit so far, but we are going to go up, and a lot of it is the nature reserve. Is that with the cannon?
Oh, it's a memorial to the military presence.
Oh, okay. Oh, there's a little sign over here. There's very good signs all over. Ooh. I thought that was a real person. That made me jump. So this is the southernmost gate of the city, and this was built back in 1557 by, well, under Charles V, Holy Roman Empire, who was then Charles I of Spain. So this predates the Brits being here. The arms over the original gate, which led to a drawbridge, include those of Spain and Gibraltar, and Sir John Addy, then governor. Okay. Oh yes, I can see the coat of arms of Spain there, and the coat of arms of Gibraltar. There was very much a lot here when the Brits captured it. It wasn't like it was some uninhabited place. It was a city. Still, I mean, it had been a city since the Moorish times. So when the Spanish built this, it was called Africa Gate, I guess because it was the closest to Africa. Actually, when the Brits came here, it was renamed Southport Gate. Here we've got the Trafalga Cemetery. Some people are buried here who died in Gibraltar during the Napoleonic Wars, with some graves dating back to 1718. So the Battle of Trafalgar took place on Cape Trafalgar, which is here in Andalusia, and we are here. So not too far away. So some of the wounded from the Battle of Trafalgar were transported to Gibraltar, British territory, to recover from their wounds. And it's often thought that this graveyard was the final place of rest for these people who died of their wounds. Although I have just read here that although its present name commemorates the Battle of Trafalgar, only 2 of those buried here died of their wounds suffered at Trafalgar. Captain Thomas Norman, Royal Marine Corps of HMS Mars, and Lieutenant William Forster of HMS Colossus. Most of those that died at Trafalgar were buried at sea, and Lord Nelson's body was transported back to London for a state funeral. So Nelson was not buried here, but he does actually have connections to Gibraltar. He passed through quite a lot on his various naval explorations. Actually, a lot of the people who were buried here died of yellow fever epidemics, which were raging through Gibraltar in the 19th century. But due to Gibraltar's location, it's been a really important naval location. I did actually read that in the Second World War, all civilians were evacuated from Gibraltar. Some of them were sent to Madeira, some of them were sent to Morocco, but it was very much just a war base. And do you know, Rich, I'm sure someone in my family was here.
They may well have been if they were in the armed forces.
Yeah. I don't think it would have been my granddad, because he was only 16 when the war ended. He was in the Navy, but... Well, maybe it was him, actually. Maybe that was where he got sent.
Could have been. He could have even just passed through here.
Maybe, because my granddad turned 16 the last year of the Second World War, and he trained up and joined the Navy, and was only in the war for about 2 weeks before VE Day. Ah. And here is the famous Cable Car of Gibraltar, which is how you usually get up this massive rock. However, as you can see, today it's closed. We're closed due to strong winds, which you can understand. It has been quite blustery. So I'm not too sure what our plans are. We'd like to see some of the rock. I feel like it is something you kind of have to see when you're in Gibraltar, but I don't think I'm walking all the way up there. Rich has walked all the way to the top before, I could do if I was prepared for a hike, but I'm carrying 3 days worth of stuff on my back and I've only got 500 millilitres of water, so I don't think that's going to be a goer today. And I've just gone past a gate with some of these. Keep calm, Gibraltar will always be British. Coronation of King Charles. UK flag, Gibraltar flag. You don't really see British stuff like that in mainland UK. Like, I don't think I've seen a single one of those flags with King Charles's coronation on. So it's interesting how here it seems to be more British, but I guess it is the people who want to stay British do so by having all of that British memorabilia and being that patriotic, because generally, at least my generation, I would say we're not that patriotic, really. Oh. So we've made it up to the Moorish Castle. Now this is located within the nature reserve, so you do have to pay £25 to access it, but it's not just this castle, there's a few other things to see as well. All of the things we're going to see in the next little part of the video will be included in this £25 ticket, so it does feel a bit expensive, but we'll see how much we can actually see for that price. So this is a Moorish castle, so it would have been built during the Moorish times in Gibraltar, but it's also Queen Charlotte's battery from 1727, so that would have been about 20 years after it became British. The British took over. Oh, and you've got the view here, and that's pretty cool. You can see the runway. And the border is just there, and then into Spain. It's a crazy way to cross a border. And then that's all the sea. So the Moors come from what is now Morocco, and we are so close to Morocco right now. You can see it quite clearly on the camera. That mountain there, that is Morocco. So it was just a quick hop over the sea, really, for the Moors to come here, and they claimed the rock and built a fortress here, which is this fortress in front of us that we're about to go into. Now, if you've been elsewhere in Andalusia and in many other places in Spain, you'll know that a lot of Spain was Moorish for a good few hundred years, but it was actually here in Gibraltar where the Moors launched their kind of takeover of this part of Spain. So this is a really essential part of Moorish history. And it says here, when the Moors recaptured Gibraltar from the Spaniards in 1333, they rebuilt an earlier tower, ruined in the fighting, into this solid tower of homage, which has since withstood 10 sieges. Oh, I love old places like this. You can just feel like history come alive. It's so wild to think that, like, this was all Moorish. Oh, there we go, the tower within the tower. Rich? There's more steps. I guess I'll try and get to the top. This looks like these were all bathhouses, like hammams, in the 14th century. You can see really here how much we are a peninsula, because you've got the coast on both sides, and it's just this bridge of land, which is now the airport, that was connecting Gibraltar to the mainland, really. So for the Moors who wanted to take over Spain and further into Europe, it did make complete sense for them to capture here, because we are so close to Morocco, and also it is very much a peninsula on its own. And it also kind of explains why it was a lot easier for British naval forces to capture. On the plaque outside, it said that the Moors recaptured Gibraltar from the Spaniards in 1333.
Oh, there you go.
Did you not know about that?
No.
Oh.
Cool.
Well, I guess it was just kind of a few battles, wasn't it?
Yeah, Reconquista was a long time.
Yeah.
A couple of 100 years it took.
Yeah, so I guess it was just sort of going backwards and forwards. Right, we're just about to leave the Moorish Castle and head on to explore some more of Gibraltar's history. But it's worth mentioning that Gibraltar's name actually has Arabic origins. So it's named after the 8th century North African leader Tariq bin Zayed, and it was originally called Jebel Tariq. Jebel is the Arabic word for hill or mountain. So it's Jebel Tariq originally, and over the years that has been adapted to Gibraltar. We've also spotted our first monkey, which I'm not excited about at all. I really don't like monkeys. I just hate how they climb on you and potentially grab things. Ugh. We're walking in the World War II tunnels now. So this is all included in the £25 that you pay. Entry to the tunnels is included in your nature reserve ticket. Just put a helmet on. Nice. Very, very damp in here. So, these are World War II tunnels. And I guess we're wearing these hats because of low overhangs. There's all these war era news articles here. Italians invade Albania. This is the Evening Telegraph. Hitler marches troops into Austria. Oh, it must have been a terrifying time. Oh, this is the Daily Alaska Empire. New war threat appears in Europe. That is March 18th, 1938. So, a year and a half before the war started. You can see here Gibraltar's advantageous position during the war to access, well, largely North Africa, but elsewhere in the Mediterranean as well. It's a connection with Malta and also out to the Atlantic, Morocco and Dakar. So as I've said, Gibraltar is a massive rock, basically. But during the Second World War, there were tunnels that constructed and went basically through the rock. And due to the risk of raids and, just risk of it being attacked, people who were fighting here, the civilians are all evacuated, but people who were here just basically lived in the rock. It said here there was 4 water reservoirs, a garrison for 16,000 people, power generation station, a water distillation plant, a hospital, a bakery, a telephone exchange, ammunition magazines, a vehicle workshop, and the infamous Stay Behind cave. Don't know what the infamous Stay Behind cave is. Is it like a burial? Something to do with that? So this was just part of what was actually used. Gibraltar must have been in such a vulnerable position, not just because of this peninsula and it being out in the sea, obviously very susceptible to sea raids, which happened when the Moors initially came and then when the British came, but also because it had a land border with Franco Spain. And as I was talking about in another video when we were a bit further north in Spain, Franco and Hitler kind of had a pact. Spain wasn't hugely involved in World War II, but Franco was definitely on Hitler's side. So that must have been a very vulnerable feeling as well. I can understand why people were evacuated. Right, here we've got the evacuation room and the espionage room. Guess we'll go down here. Here's some of the information about the evacuees. So over 16,000 people were evacuated from Gibraltar during World War II. So I was kind of wrong, actually. To me, it seems like Gibraltar was in a very perilous position, but it actually says here that civilians were referred to as useless mouths by the British military. Although it was a term meant to denote the limited resources of any war zone, the no-nonsense label highlighted Gibraltar as a military stronghold and no longer a city. It was deemed insensitive to many Gibraltarians. It said they had to leave Gibraltar not because of any enemy action, because the homes were wanted for purposes connected with the defence of Gibraltar. And there's some real life insights here. Largely it was women and children who were evacuated, and this female evacuee who was sent to the UK wasn't able to work as a nurse, even though she trained as one. And she received notice that if she didn't evacuate, she would have to spend 3 months in prison. 3,829 Gibraltarian men stayed behind, and I think around 1,000 women would have stayed behind as well. I'm not sure what the criteria were for staying behind, but it seemed like quite a lot of women couldn't. So some Gibraltarians were evacuated to the UK, some were evacuated to Morocco, and some were evacuated to Madeira. Oh, and it looks like some were even evacuated to Jamaica. Wow. And a number of Gibraltarians evacuated themselves to Spain to live with family, but they were not allowed to cross over the border back to Gibraltar until after the war. You can see here, it goes on forever. But I don't think there's any more like exhibitions up there or anything. And then it goes on down here as well. Ooh, but shall we head back out to the light? This is an exhibition all about the Great Siege of Gibraltar. As I mentioned, Gibraltar was officially made British in 1713, and it did say in perpetuity. But by the 1770s, the Spanish were not happy with this and they wanted Gibraltar back. So in 1779, the Great Siege of Gibraltar began. The Great Siege of Gibraltar was basically Spanish forces making a camp right on the border, ultimately sieging the city. So the city was completely blocked off from Spain, and there was a naval blockade as well. So the conditions here were absolutely dire. There was barely any food. Scurvy was really common because there was barely any fresh fruits and vegetables. And the scurvy epidemic only actually abated when they managed to seize a ship with oranges and lemons coming from Malaga. They then administered all of this to the people suffering with scurvy, and they were ultimately healed, which led to a lot more realisation about the cures and causes of scurvy itself. There were also loads of other diseases because people were living in such close quarters. The siege ended with an offensive in 1783 when a lot of the Spanish Franco ships were captured and destroyed, and after that they signed a treaty with the British. The conditions of the treaty were that the British would get to keep Gibraltar, but France and Spain would take Minorca, some parts of Florida and some parts of the Caribbean. So that again officially reiterated Britain's claim to this rock in the Mediterranean. But it is very interesting learning all about that and seeing Spain literally there. The top of the rock is all the way up there. I ain't making it up there. Not today. So we've got a BA plane just taking off from the runway now. Windy takeoff. Right, we are now here at the Great Siege Tunnels. So more siege education, I presume. Now, it's worth mentioning that during the Great Siege of Gibraltar, the Gibraltar forces were vastly outnumbered by the Franco-Spanish forces. I'll write on the screen exactly how much they were outnumbered by, but the Franco-Spanish forces could keep amassing more and more people, really, whereas for the Gibraltarians, it was just them. It wasn't like the Second World War when people came to Gibraltar to defend it, it was just the Gibraltarians. But it is thought that the reasons that they won are A, because the Gibraltar's geography is very defensive in itself, it's very impermeable, being a massive rock, and obviously the Gibraltarians knowing the rock and the geology very, very well. And it's also thought to be because of this guy, Elliot. He was the governor of Gibraltar, and it is thought that his relentless tactics were really, really beneficial to the ultimate failure of the siege. Such jaunty music down here. Pretty wild. These are the tunnels that people would have been in during the siege. So the forces would have been right there. The conditions were awful in Gibraltar, but they actually weren't that much better in Spain either. It was just a camp that they were in, and they had to get supplies from Malaga or Seville. And here's where the tunnel ended. So this was built a bit later on, and it was used during the Second World War, just like the tunnels that we saw previously. So there is a secondary little viewpoint that you can come down to, and it is pretty much just a platform on the edge of the rock. Look, you can see the rock right here, and the tunnels that we were in just went all the way through there, just literally through the rock. And then it's the same view of the runway here, but I think we're going to go up because it's windy down here. We're going down. We are walking back over the airport runway. I do have a few more thoughts to share about this British overseas territory, but we are hot-footing it to try and make the 8 p.m. bus. So I will catch up once we get to the bus station. We are back in Spain and back at La Linea bus station, where we're taking a bus to Algeciras, and our trip around this part of Spain continues tomorrow. We're actually going over to mainland Africa to a Spanish exclave that's there. So to conclude this video, while I don't think that the British should ever have taken it over in the first place, that was the 18th century and a lot of people were taking a lot of places over back then. Nowadays it does seem that the general sentiment is that Gibraltarians want to stay British, stay as a British overseas territory. That is what I've seen today from signs and posters and everything in Gibraltar, but also the results from the referendums that they had also point to that. But I did also notice a keenness to be in the EU and or Schengen, and obviously with Brexit that has been taken away. So I'm not 100% sure where Gibraltar goes from this. There are definitely some issues around the border at the moment with queues and hold-ups. Could it become its own country at some point? I really don't know. If you have any thoughts, comments or questions, please drop me a comment. I'm very open to hearing all sides of opinions on this. I'm very intrigued to know what everyone thinks. So thank you so much for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video then make sure you subscribed, because as I mentioned, tomorrow we are heading over the Mediterranean to the Spanish exclave of Ceuta, which is in quite a similar position to Gibraltar. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I'll see you next time. Bye!